Welcome to Plant Behavior 101. I'm your host, and today we're diving straight into a massive biological mystery about one seriously fascinating little plant. We're going to completely challenge what you think you know about intelligence, because by the end of this explainer, our traditional understanding of biology, it's going to need a total rewrite. Let's get into it. So, class, here is the ultimate question we're tackling today. Can an organism truly learn without a brain? I mean, we're so used to assuming that neurons are an absolute requirement for memory, right? We link the acquisition of memories and making behavioral decisions directly to having a nervous system. But what if a brain is just one evolutionary pathway to learning? What if there's another way? Okay, to set the stage, let's quickly define the absolute simplest form of learning, habituation. Basically, habituation is an active, adaptive process where an organism learns to just ignore a repeated, totally harmless stimulus. It's like learning to tune out the background hum of an air conditioner so you can focus on a conversation. It's an active filtering of what actually matters. Keep this concept right at the front of your mind because it's the foundation for our entire analysis today. Real quick, here's our course syllabus for the lecture. We'll cover the plant behavior paradox, the drop experiment, light and energy trade-offs, memory without a brain, the underlying biological machinery, and finally, redefining intelligence. All right, Section 1. The plant behavior paradox. Let's meet our star student, the Mimosa pudica. You've probably seen this plant before. It's famous for defensively folding its delicate leaves inward in a matter of seconds whenever it's touched or physically disturbed. It's super cool to watch, but here is the crucial catch. This defense tactic comes at a massive energetic cost. Closing its leaves drops the plant's photosynthetic rate by up to 40%. It literally starves itself of solar energy just to stay safe. If it slammed its leaves shut every single time a breeze blew or a harmless raindrop fell, it would severely stunt its own growth. It has to be smart about it. Which brings us to Section 2, the drop experiment, where we actually test this plant's memory. So to test if this plant could somehow learn to ignore a harmless stimulus and save all that precious energy, researchers came up with a brilliant behavioral test using ecological theory. They literally built a custom drop system, mounted individual potted mimosa plants onto a steel rail, and gave them a totally harmless yet completely startling 15-centimeter freefall into a padded foam base. This sudden drop reliably forces the plant to panic and close all its leaves. To track the response, the researchers meticulously measured the leaf breath, tip to tip, before and after every single drop. And here was the actual training regimen for our little subjects. By repeatedly dropping the plants 60 times in a row, delivering these intense consecutive trains of drops over a single day, the scientists could see if the leaves eventually stopped folding up. Basically, they were asking, would the plant figure out that this terrifying 15-centimeter drop wasn't actually a real threat? Moving to Section 3, light, energy, and learning. This is where we look at the ecological trade-off. Researchers hypothesized that learning, in this context, is a serious ecological trade-off. It's a balancing act between the risk of getting eaten and the reward of gathering enough energy from the sun. To test this, we have to look at plants grown in low-light environments versus those grown in high-light environments. Think about it. A plant literally starving for sunshine absolutely cannot afford to keep its leaves closed for long. It desperately needs every single photon it can grab. A highlight plant, on the other hand, well, it's got energy to spare, so it can afford to be a bit more defensive. And just look at how perfectly the data maps to this idea. The yellow line represents our low-light plants, and the red line is our highlight plants. This proves that the low-light plants learn to ignore the drops so much faster. After just a few drops, they started leaving their leaves wide open. They recognized the stimulus was harmless, and they actively chose to maximize their energy gathering instead of hiding. The highlight plants? They learned too, but they were way more cautious, keeping their leaves at least partially closed for longer. They could afford to be a bit paranoid. Okay, Section 4, memory without a brain. It's time for the dishabituation test. Now, you might be wondering, how do we know these plants actually learned anything? What if they were just totally exhausted from being dropped 60 times and physically couldn't close their leaves anymore? Well, to rule out simple fatigue, the scientists used a classic standard from animal behavioral science called a dishabituation test. They took the trained plants, put them on a shaker plate, and shook them violently at 250 revolutions per minute for exactly 5 seconds. This was a completely novel, wildly intense stimulus. If the plant was just tired, it wouldn't react at all. But if it had truly learned to ignore the drop, this terrifying new shake should trigger an instant reaction. And man, react it did. The plants instantly folded their leaves tight during the novel shake. This definitively proved they had plenty of energy and their motor mechanisms were working perfectly. But here is the absolute kicker. When that familiar 15-centimeter drop was presented again just 10 minutes later, the plants kept their leaves wide open. They completely ignored the drop again. They essentially proved they actively remembered exactly what was safe and what wasn't. Astonishingly, the researchers came back nearly a month later, 28 days to be exact, to test these exact same plants again. Even when left completely undisturbed for a whole month, or even when swapped into totally new lighting environments, the mimosa retained this learned behavioral memory. They remembered the drop was harmless 28 days later. Guys, for a plant holding a distinct memory for a month is an unbelievably long time. Which brings us to Section 5, the biological machinery. How on earth do they do it? Let's zoom way into the microscopic level. It is truly mind-blowing to compare the shared biological machinery between animal learning, like what we see in Aplysia sea slugs, and plant learning in our Mimosa pudica. It turns out plants possess a highly sophisticated intracellular calcium signaling network, exactly like animals do. And when we look at the specific proteins involved, calmodulin, which is a calcium-binding protein absolutely crucial for memory formation in animals, has over a 70% sequence similarity in plants. Plus, both use voltage-gated ion channels to produce electrical waves. They are literally using almost the exact same physiological toolkits to process information. Additionally, researchers hypothesize that this incredibly long-term learning might be stored via epigenetic reprogramming. This is where the plant physically alters its chromatin status through processes like DNA methylation based on its environmental experiences. Now, normally, we associate epigenetic changes in plants with severe, life-threatening stress, like extreme drought or freezing cold. But remember, the mimosa plants in this study weren't stressed. They were just experiencing a harmless drop. This suggests that epigenetic reprogramming could actually be a foundational, everyday mechanism for learning and memory across all living systems. All right, Section 6, Redefining Biological Intelligence. Class, as we review today's data, we are forced to confront a massive paradigm shift. The boundary between complex animal intelligence and simple plant automation, it's blurring right before our eyes. We have to accept that acquiring memory, learning from environmental trade-offs, and making active behavioral decisions is just not exclusively tied to possessing a nervous system. The Mimosa pudica proves that cognitive ecology, how organisms use information to survive, applies to flora just as much as fauna. This quote from the researchers themselves perfectly summarizes our lecture today. The process of remembering may not require the conventional neural networks and pathways of animals. Learning and remembering are universal biological survival mechanisms. Brains and neurons are simply one spectacular evolutionary solution for processing information, but as we've seen, they are absolutely not a mandatory requirement for learning. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If a humble, entirely brainless little plant is out there calculating ecological risks, memorizing its environment, and adapting its behavior for weeks at a time, what else out there in the natural world is far smarter than we ever imagined? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open and never stop questioning the world around you.